Hello, welcome back to the Hive. And again, we've our special guest, Sarah Brewster, who's back with us for another appearance. So we didn't frighten her off too much last time, and our regular contributor, Lorna Leeson. So thank you for joining us. And today we're going to be responding to a bit of a heartfelt plea that I picked up on a forum online. It was an online forum, particularly around working from home. And I'll read you what she said. Despite being an introvert, I'm missing the office environment now that COVID-19 has led me to work from home. I see the benefits and I'm doing my best to embrace it, but I'm looking for tips on how to improve the feeling of isolation. My job is siloed in that I only have my manager and work with very few other people, and my manager is hands-off for the most part. So this is somebody who is essentially quite a happy introvert, but even they're missing the office environment. Perhaps plays a little bit to some of the things we've talked about a lot on these, about everyone's an individual and you've got to recognize people have different drivers, but even someone who accepts that they're introverted is missing some of their company of the office, struggling with feeling very isolated. And I thought it was such a kind of heartfelt plea that we might be able to sort of share some ideas and some suggestions, but also what can our listeners, who are particularly HR people, team leaders, internal comms people, how can they be aware of these challenges, which this person clearly isn't going to be the only person feeling this way, and what can they do to help people in this situation? So Sarah, it starts towards an area I think that is particularly of interest to you, which is the whole sort of mental health and well-being thing. So what would you say, first of all, from a sort of management perspective, what can people be doing to help support home workers who are feeling isolated?
It's really interesting. I'm talking to a friend actually who's got this same challenge, but from the management point of view. And I think what she faces is how to bring a team together during these times when actually we are working remotely, and I think that's a pretty common thread across this, and we've lost those landmark moments of banter and chit chat around the coffee making, or
water random meeting in the corridor.
And whilst obviously we know that productivity has gone up, we've still missing that social interaction, and social interaction is really key to that communication. And actually more than that, those moments outside of kind of meetings and decisions that are made, it's those moments where you really pick up on the nuances of how someone is and what they're doing, and so they're vital, really. And I think really it's on everyone to be conscious of the fact that we have missed those, so trying different routes to communication, so trying to just pick up the phone and have a chat, or pick up, even having, I use audio messages actually, and I send colleagues little audio messages, but actually it's really powerful, because you've had a little bit of banter, so it's a little bit silly, but actually it breaks up that kind of monotony of what is also otherwise just sort of being sat at Zoom or Teams or whatever it is all day long. Yeah. So and we by bringing that connection together, you sort of feel that you're part of something. So key to this is those connection points, and because they've changed, it's about being creative with how we make those. And I understand that for some managers that's not easy. For some managers that's not what they lead with. They don't think that, and they may well be introverted themselves. But perhaps that's where they need the wider support of the HR department and their management team to think of ways to support each other and communicate, and also having rules about cameras. In my friend's organisation, they're allowed to start meetings with the cameras off. Well, even the very first few seconds having the cameras on it shows you're present. It shows a presence that you don't otherwise have. So actually that's quite powerful, right? Because you can see someone's face and you can see their reaction, and although we can't read the nuances in quite the same way, we can still see whether they're smiling or whether they're a bit fed up. Yes. So I think there are ways. We've just got to be creative.
Be more creative, which is so much of what has been a recurring theme throughout this whole thing, hasn't it? It's about being proactive and thinking harder about things rather than just doing the things the way you've always done them. Lorna, am I right in saying, didn't you go through a bit of a random phase just lately where you were actually having telephone conversations with people?
Radical, right? Yeah, I know. It's I felt I have a bit of a love-hate with all the technology that enables us to connect with people at the moment, because I miss the connection so much, and I think human-to-human connection is so important.
So you identify with this particular plea, then, really?
I do. I think I'm an ambivert. I don't like the label extrovert, introvert, so I'll sit on the fence. Thank you.
Fair enough.
But I do miss the human connection, and I don't think technology always helps by itself. It needs to be used intentionally. You need to be really intentional with how you use it. So somebody has been messaging me back and forth on a social media channel with some request for help with something, and I just thought, I haven't got any time. I'm just going to pick up the phone out of the blue. We actually hadn't exchanged phone numbers. I just went on the website and got their mobile number and said, "It's Lorna, let's have a chat," because I couldn't be doing with all of everything else. It just felt like technology was a barrier at that point. And I do that quite a lot with clients as well, just a phone call out of the blue, rather than I'm replying to this Slack or Teams message, or I'm going to schedule something. And we've spoken about that before when we talked about the Zoom fatigue. But something that I think I've been reflecting on quite a bit since we did the episode on Zoom fatigue, because this is the world we live in, is how do we, to the point that you were both making, be more thoughtful and more intentional with the way that we're using the tools that we just have to use. I was running and participating in a workshop yesterday across 2 different countries and 4 different time zones. And in the end, one of the things that I did was I set up 2 different screens, one so that I could see the presentation with the little faces at the bottom, and the other so that I could see all of the faces. Because what was really important to me was being able to read the room. And even though if you weren't in the room, being able to see, oh, so-and-so, how did they react to that particular comment? It looks like they might have something to say. How did that land with them? I think Sarah's point about being able to see people's faces is so important. I've noticed that as lockdown's gone on and kind of people have been struggling to juggle all sorts of things, and maybe the house hasn't been as tidy as you want, or the kids have gone a bit feral, then people have been turning their cameras off. And there've been a few clients that I've actually worked with, and I've said, you know what, just put the Teams background on, or put the Zoom filter on, whatever makes you feel comfortable about showing up. But there is something really important about seeing somebody's face.
Talking face to face, seeing the whites of their eyes.
You don't replace all the human energy, but you do need to be really intentional. And also, I love this format because it's 3 of us, and I think that's probably about as many as you can have a real conversation with, and look at somebody and pay attention to what's going on with them, or how are they reacting? Do they want to chip in? I think when you've got 16, 17, 20 tiny boxes on a screen, you may as well have just pre-recorded something and broadcast it at them. So people want connection, and we need to seek out the ways we can do that really intentionally.
So would you say then it's coming back to this cry for help almost, I'm not putting it quite that extreme, but this request for support, it comes back to team leaders, line managers really knowing their people and knowing the individual preferences and desires of those individuals, and making sure that you're playing to them. I mean, this particular person said that their manager is hands off for the most part too, which I mean is an immediate red flag, isn't it? Why is their manager hands off?
Well, they were probably a pants manager before COVID, and they're not going to have transformed post COVID.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it goes back to a problem that pre-existed COVID, and perhaps goes back to that problem about we don't give managers tools to be managers. We promote people into management roles, but we don't give them the skill sets to become managers. And communication is one of the most vital skills that you can have as a leader.
Mm.
And it may not sit comfortably with everybody, but there are still ways that you can teach someone to have powerful conversations and connections. And certainly the other point to that is that is a point I made earlier about well-being and our duty of care. We're not empowering leaders to understand what that bit means either. So when we don't understand that we have a duty of care and why we have a duty of care and how that can become and how we can manage that, managers don't know how. They don't have the tools to do the how. And that a lot of that duty of care is the listening, isn't it? It's the communication.
Yes.
It's the conversations that you have. And actually it's not fluffy, nor is it glib. It's actually tangibly brilliant and powerful, and done well, this girl wouldn't feel isolated. She'd feel connected, and therefore she'd feel more productive. And when we were talking earlier about productivity, but productivity is so key in any situation, regardless of COVID. Productivity is the key, and that comes down to feeling empowered and feeling that you're important and that you matter. And this poor girl perhaps doesn't feel that she matters.
She matters, that she's just there and isolated.
Regardless of whether you're an extrovert or you're an introvert, or whether you're the alpha male, or whether you're, whatever character you bring to work, you should feel that you matter to the business, because otherwise what's the point of the recruitment process, and what's the point of all that clever onboarding that we do as HR people, and then we go and ask people to not be important in the business? No, that's not how it works. So I think there's a bigger message here that I don't think just sits specifically within the COVID subject. I think it sits across that management lesson that we need to be better managers.
Better at soft skills comes right back to our first episode where we talked about empathy and emotional intelligence, about having the empathy to work out that somebody perhaps needs a bit more support and a bit more interaction. Okay, lovely. Anything to add to that before we close, Lorna?
I just think, the question was, what do I do? And I think there is something very practical if you are surrounded by maybe managers who aren't doing this, is to know that there's nothing stopping you from seeking that connection yourself. And it might not necessarily be at work, it might not be, but then go and find it in other ways in your local community or with your own networks. If you're not getting it from work, make sure you're getting it elsewhere, because actually those reserves have to be kept topped up. Yes. You can't expect that to be delivered, by a manager who's maybe not equipped.
Absolutely. And there is still an enormous need, and people be biting people's hands off for volunteering and contributions in all manner of community ways that can fill that gap, as you suggested there. Lovely. Great stuff. Lorna, thank you. Sarah, thank you. And thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye. Bye.